Hi guys, welcome back. Appreciate y'all dropping in tonight. We've got Megan on board. Looks like she's just getting logged into her computer right now. So appreciate everybody coming back. We're going to have probably a slightly shorter live stream, hopefully, tonight, talking about owning your first horse. So appreciate everybody, supporting the channel and chiming in and watching this. Not sure yet if YouTube is caught up, so I'm just kind of jibber jabbering until I've got another computer set to see when things pick up. YouTube's got its advertising running. So for those of you who are going to be watching this on replay, it's kind of why I'm chatting a little bit. Is YouTube, before you can start a live stream, YouTube will run its advertising, and some of those who are clicking and skipping the ads would be seeing this, and those who are supporting the channel and watching the ads are not seeing this. So anyway, so appreciate everybody coming in. I'm gonna looks like Megan's trying to finish her dinner. I'll let her finish that real quick. Again, we're gonna talk tonight about owning your first horse and all that entails. It's definitely a different experience if you've never owned a horse before. And just a quick reminder, please give this a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We do have other ways to support the channel besides watching the ads. There's a super chat and a super stickers option for those of you who are tuned in on the live chat. So appreciate you for supporting that way. Both Megan and I are not viewing this on YouTube. We are viewing this on StreamYard. You see right up there is the StreamYard logo. So just to let you know, the chat is a little bit delayed for that. And so Megan and I generally see chat information probably a good 30 seconds behind what you might see on YouTube. So, but feel free to ask comments in the live chat and we will do our best to address them. And it looks like Megan is ready to roll. Let me see if I can bring her on. Hey, Megan.
Hey.
Hope you're able to finish dinner. I'm sorry.
We're good.
As usual, your audio is delayed for a second here for me. So we'll let that StreamYard plugging you into the stream right now. But how are you? I hope you're doing well.
I am doing okay.
It's hot out. It's hot here. It was hot.
It was very hot today.
Yeah.
Trying to stay hydrated.
Yeah, I have a couple of them actually. Bottled water. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So anyway, appreciate you taking your time tonight. So I know we normally are set up on Thursday nights to do this live stream. Last week, for those who maybe didn't catch, we did not do one last week just because with the holiday last week, we kind of just skipped last week. And then you have a horse show coming up. So Thursday did not work for you this week. So instead of going 2 full weeks without a live stream, we're a little bit ahead of that. So
yay!
It'd be fun. So our discussion tonight is owning your first horse, and that's a pretty big topic to cover, right?
Yeah, it's a fun topic.
Yes. So, obviously a lot of my friends, a lot of your friends are horse owners, and it's been a long time since I was a first-time horse owner. I actually did something that you at your training barn sometimes offer. I leased a horse before I purchased.
That's smart.
At Lindinhof, right?
Yep, that's really smart.
So do you want to talk about how that kind of helps your clients maybe learn a little bit about quote unquote ownership before they're really actually the owner?
Yeah, I mean, they have a horse that they're working with regularly. They can purchase things for the horse. They can take the horse to the horse show, and just start to develop a relationship and see, is this too much work? Maybe it's too much work. Maybe leasing is the right option, right? Because my lease is pretty simple. I keep it simple. There's one fee. In other leases, people pay insurance, for the vet, the farrier, but with my lease, it's just one fee, and there you go. And so they get used to like paying the bills at the first of the month, and then developing this relationship with the horse and seeing if, just get their feet wet. What's the horse like at the horse show? Maybe we go to a clinic, those kinds of things. And then they can really decide whether this is what they want. So
Right.
yeah, I think it's a great first step.
Yeah, it is. And the way you do it definitely is a little different than ownership. Because like you said, you just offer a flat fee. So they're not going to necessarily, they're never going to see like, okay, there's a board bill here and there's the lessons and training here. And then, we've got periodic veterinarian bills coming in here. And then we've got the standard farrier every 5 or 6 weeks. But yours is just built in and it's a one-time thing, but it is a start to learning how to write those checks and getting your feet wet as far as what the costs are,
Yeah. But I think I've said it in the last live stream, when people decide it's time to buy, what I like to do is sit down, go to dinner and talk about it, like, what is your goal?
Right.
Pleasure, competition, and then talk about expenses of the horse. And actually, I like to write up, generally what the expenses are, that there's the one-time costs as well as the ongoing costs, the monthly costs.
Right.
Of horse.
And I think really being the whole jump to first time horse ownership, it's a time commitment, as you said, but I think the majority of it is the monetary commitment.
And it's a huge
for your clients, because you have a scheduled time for the vet and you have scheduled dates for the farrier, and that may not be true for people who maybe are not at an actual dedicated training barn. They may be at a boarding facility. And I remember as a kid, I think the first horses I owned, there was a sign-up sheet for a farrier, but when I eventually got a little older and ended up having to change boarding barns, I had to locate a farrier and make the phone call and make schedule an appointment to meet them out there. It was, very much all on me. So it's definitely different for everybody. It depends on your situation. You certainly do make it easy. And some boarding barns, depending on how big they are, they may have pre-scheduled dates with farriers, one or more farriers, and pre-scheduled dates with veterinarians. But that is definitely, it's not necessarily that the board.
Yeah, and it's hit or miss, too, I think. So we're pretty organized, and I try to alleviate those kinds of stresses for my clients. I think it's easier for me to just organize it and get it done. But that's definitely, the time commitment is huge. Time commitment, money, is very huge, and just having realistic expectations. I think it's really important to think about, the first year. It really, you need to take that first year and really get to know your horse. A lot of times people purchase a horse, and in the first year they're thinking they're going to go right to a horse show and see what that's like. And I think you really need to take the time, for the horse to adjust, and also for you to adjust to the time commitment and the money commitment.
Yes, definitely. And it's important. I think people need to really do their research as far as what the true costs are going to be before they, they buy a horse. You always have a plan A. Obviously, you're going to buy a horse. You've figured out somewhere where you're going to put the horse, but that's plan A. So it's always wise to probably have 2 budgets, I would think, kind of plan A and plan B. Well, what if something happens to the barn that's plan A, and what's plan B? What's your backup choice on where you want to go, and how much do they charge? I feel like barns in the area I'm at they're not all the same board fee per month by any stretch of the imagination. So, you've kind of got to really consider that, because if you're looking at as an introductory horse owner, maybe you're looking at kind of like a moderate level in there. Not every barn can just take on a random new horse. So
and they're not all created equal. It's all different fees. That's the other thing, do they charge you for leading in the horse, putting on blankets, and figuring out what their rules are. Every barn, every owner has their own set of rules, their own little piccadillies that we're all kind of like obsessed about, I think. And it's really good to find out what those rules are, and definitely having options like what is your local community about, like,
For sure.
and having a group of friends at a barn, or I would suggest, I know I'm biased, but you should really put your horse in training with a trainer for the first month. So that way that trainer can help you adjust to ownership. Maybe
Absolutely.
staying with a trainer is not a fit long term. And maybe it is. And maybe you find like, wow, I really like this. But, not full training isn't for everyone, neither is boarding for everyone. And so I think, but the first month to 3 months, I would suggest like,
Hello, Gabby, Travel Adventures.
Having a trainer to help you.
Hi, Gabby. Say hi to Gabby.
Hi, Gabby.
She likes horses. Hi, Gabby.
Yay.
Yeah, I agree. So, that's a thing they need to consider under their budget is, and maybe they're fortunate and they can connect with that trainer before they buy. Maybe they've been able to take lessons, such as, for instance, your type of facility. But, a lot of people there's a lot of people that just don't have that type of situation. So even if you can't go into a full training situation, such as what's at your barn, they might be able to find a professional that maybe is occasionally teaching at the barn where they're looking to bring this horse. So,
for sure. That's a great idea. Like once a week, have someone a resource that you can connect to and get help. Because
sure.
I think, as it's life changing. I think just like having kids, you think, my life's going to change for sure, but you don't really know until you actually have your horse. And the little thing, like they get lumps or bumps, and you might get a little too overexcited. A horse gets an abscess. You might get a little too overexcited because you think it's the end of the world. You won't get to ride your horse for a week to 2 weeks.
Right.
It's not the end of the world. I would take the abscess for $200. Definitely take the abscess. But, that just goes to experience. And, you really need that first year. And there's also patterns that horses develop. Sometimes they get funguses or abscesses at certain times of year. Maybe they're a cold weather horse. So you buy your horse in the summer and then all of a sudden he starts getting spooky or cold backed during the fall, and you're like, who's this horse? And then the snow falls off the roof and you're like, oh my God. And you get to, you get a cold weather horse, and you might want to change how you're handling your horse. And so also that first year, it might not be advisable to go to horse shows. Develop a relationship with your horse first, and see what is their reaction to umbrellas or people in big coats or ATVs around the farm before you go to the horse show, because then that horse will trust you at the horse show and look for you. So definitely taking the time.
Yeah. One of the things too that I think really people need to consider, and not everybody is set up to have a horse at their house, and that's probably a good thing, because if you've never had horses before, they're being around more people at a boarding facility, even a small one or a large one, who have that knowledge base on horses can help you. You talked about like a fungus, but injuries, is this injury warranting a vet or is it not warranting a vet? How do I deworm my horse? How often do I deworm my horse? That you should defer to your vet, but maybe those are things that you don't even know that you should be asking your veterinarian about. So, that's kind of a broad thing, because we talk about you need to find a vet, you need to find a farrier, you need to find a boarding facility, but maybe your intention is to eventually bring a horse home, but you just talked about in your first year getting to know that horse, and maybe it's a good idea to have the horse at a boarding facility for the first year, you know, so you can be around people who can teach you some of these things. You know, it's a learning experience with horses every single day. I certainly feel like I will never stop learning.
Never.
They cease to surprise you, and it's just, you can never know everything. It's just amazing that, you know. So
And
there is that. And horses are herd animals, and sometimes people don't really understand that having a solitary horse, and maybe they've got 3 acres and they're allowed to have 1 horse. It sounds lovely, but horses are herd animals, and it's extremely stressful for them to be in an environment when they don't have at least 1 other horse or donkey or mule or something to help them. And that's part of that is their safety. They can sleep while their herd mate keeps an eye out, you know, for the boogeyman and so on. But it's very stressful. If you've ever come across a horse by itself, they're generally not, they don't act like a normal horse. I find them to be very depressed. So
yeah, and socially awkward, and maybe they're, you know, they don't want to be in the herd, and something's wrong. So yeah, I definitely would never keep a horse by itself. The other thing is, like, you don't get vacation if you have your horse at home. It's a lot of work. I mean, and trying to find someone to feed the horses, like, I don't get a lot of vacations. Like, I work a lot, and I don't think that's healthy. So, you know, sometimes glorifying having horses at home, the reality is not the same. And literally every piece of article you own and those beautiful shoes that you just bought are going to end up in the barn. Pick wisely, guys.
Well, and you got to pick horse. You have to be the one caring for it at all, you know.
24/7, and like, if you miss it, like, and you have to be there and feed it, and it's best to feed them, you know, on time, like the same time every day. They love routine. If you change their routine, if you, let's say, if they're brought in at 3 o'clock and you don't get there until 5, they may be running around and maybe sopping wet by the time you get to them, because they don't understand that you took an extra 2 hours, that you can't just call them on the phone. All what they know is their routine, and that's why they live by. So choose wisely. Bored. That's what I would do. I own my own farm. I'm like, this is a lot.
It's a lot of work. And like you said, you can't just leave. You can't.
No.
You know, and maybe a quick discussion in that regards is, you know, each state and municipality may have its own laws, but generally you have to provide shelter, proper shelter for them. You can't just have them out in a field with no shelter. They have to have, you know, and the particulars may vary, but you have to have an ability for them to get out of the elements. And some people, I don't think, really understand what that entails. So in that regard, that's the thing, is if you can't have a facility, a proper facility, and, you know, it's time to go ahead and just board them. At a boarding facility, you know. And not all boarding facilities require your horse to be in a stall at night. You can, you know, people call it pasture board, or we call it rough board, or whatever you want to call it. But a lot of places have that around here. Not everyone does, but, you know, that is something you can look for. So the other option would be to find somebody who has already horses at their house, and, you know, maybe looking to add 1 or 2 boarders on. If you're willing to learn and willing to maybe be that, you know, relief for the farm owner who can maybe go for a weekend or a night, you can maybe do their chores, feed the horses for a weekend. I know, as having horses at my own property, I appreciate it so much, you know, if I have, you know, any sort of help. So sometimes, you know, and that's a way, you know, if you can find a farm owner who can take you under their wing and they can teach you. You know, maybe you can't afford someone such as yourself, a trainer, but maybe you can find a small boarding facility. And, you know, if you say, hey, I'm new, I want to learn, I'm willing to help do the work, help you, you know, with your work around the farm, if you'll teach me. That's a nice beneficial for both people.
But definitely talk about it beforehand, because that could end up being a sticky situation. I I don't like doing that too
Yeah.
much because usually people end up not working, and then
Right.
you
But I
you
mean,
have all this expense.
if you're willing to come out at feeding time and maybe help haul hay bales out and put the hay in, if the horses are in stalls, or get the hay out of the hay loft and drag it over to the pasture and throw it in the hay bale feeder, things like that. Learning how to, the other thing is, it's not just learning about caring for the horse. It's the upkeep of the property. Horse fencing. You have to learn how to maintain and create and, horse fence. So.
Oh, yeah, and if your horse is not good in the stall, it kicks the wall or damages things, you should be responsible to fix it. So you want to think about that too. It's just like having a child, I think. Yeah. And I do think that first year is the toughest year, just like getting a puppy,
Right.
seeing what they do, and they do all sorts of things, maybe they spook one day, maybe they don't, and the thing you think they're going to spook at, they don't. And just getting them acclimated, that, because after you buy them, you're probably going to move them to somewhere new. And so when you're moving them, it's maybe a place they've never been. Maybe they're a horse that's cool with it. Maybe the horse isn't, I just imported a 7-year-old, and he was like really cool in the mind. Like, I'm cool, I'm chill in his home country. And he came here and he can't concentrate. And so I was like, wow, cool. This is what he's like under stress. And so for someone who, like myself, is used to that, and I just don't have any expectations of the horses. I let them do whatever they want. But a new horse owner is going to have expectations. And I actually had a client once say to me, "Doesn't he know how much I spent on him?" No, they don't have a clue. They don't care.
They don't know about money.
No, they're kind of like a honey badger. They're just like, I do what I want, so, just, they're going to be under a lot of stress. You might want to think about, like things like ulcer guard. What are you going to feed them? Looking into, and definitely, like, when the horse switches, if you can, keep them on the feed that they've been on. Try to maintain, if the horse has only been worked 3 days a week, try to only work them 3 days a week for that first month. If they're normally worked 5-6 days a week, work them 5-6 days a week. And I wouldn't give them a lot of time off, like when they arrive, because they like routine, especially if a horse has been worked 5-6 days a week and then you give them a week off. They're going to be like, what did I do wrong? Where am I at? What's going on?
Right.
And growing up, I always was taught, put a silly horse to work, and I find with new horse owners, they're very excited, and they should be very excited. Unfortunately, they need to be a little bit more like a trainer who's cold and calloused, right? No, just kidding. but truly, you're setting the precedence. It's kind of like having a babysitter. So if the babysitter is like, hey, let's have some ice cream, whee! That horse is going to be like, yeah, I like this person. And they're going to be like, whee! If you don't set the boundaries and, show the horse, this is like, hey, I bought you. We're going to go to work. We're going to do these things. Then you're probably going to be okay. There'll be ups and downs, but they're going to push you around like a babysitter. They're going to see, like, what can I get away with? And it's not don't humanize it. Don't do that. I don't like it when people do that, because they're just being horses. They're just testing. Are you a good leader? Maybe you are. Maybe you aren't. But if you don't show them how you want their life to be in that first week, that first month, you're going to have some struggles. And that means, like, if you've told them to halt, don't let them circle around you. Don't let them move left when you've asked them to move right. You have to be really clear. And I know in the beginning we're super excited. It's really pretty. It's really a fun event, and it should be. Yeah. But keep it quiet. Keep it very clear. Otherwise, you're going to have some lumps and bumps in the beginning.
For sure. So we talked a little bit about, kind of the pre-planning, you need to talk to, if hopefully you can enlist a knowledgeable horse person in your search, such as yourself, a trainer, a riding instructor, something along those lines. You need to find somebody to trailer the horse. You need to have a veterinarian. You need to have, obviously, a place for the horse to live. You need to have a farrier / blacksmith, whatever you call, whatever everybody wants to call them.
You need new tack.
Farrier is a blacksmith, just for, what was that?
You need new tack.
Yeah, you'll need to have, equipment. You need to have, hopefully the horse comes with a halter and a lead rope, but you're going to need to have all that riding equipment. You need to have the horse's bridle and the horse's a saddle pad and a saddle and a girth, and the horse has to have a bit for the bridle generally. And that's an investment. So, this is, again, all the things you need to consider when you're budgeting to whether, you can afford a horse. Because obviously, as we've said, money is always an issue. They're not cheap to own. It's not like owning a cat. But one of the things I wanted to bring up, because you were talking about how if they do property damage, it kind of brings me back to insurance. Now, there's two types of insurance when I think about horses. There is insuring the horse medically, so that if the horse has a major medical situation, you have an insurance policy that may be able to help you afford those vet bills. So there's that. But there is also liability insurance for, if your horse either property damage, you talked about if the horse does damage to a barn or something, but there is also, what you can be personally liable if your horse injures another person at, maybe somebody gets kicked by your horse. A lot of people, have been sued because their horse did something, and, so, there is the option to get liability insurance in that regard. For people who have horses on their property, if if they're going to bring it home, they need to talk to their homeowner's insurance. Not all homeowners insurance will cover that, and they may need to have liability insurance. If you're thinking that, I'm going to bring my horse home and then I'm going to take on a boarder to be, the second horse, that is a care, custody, and control type policy. If you don't have a homeowner's rider on that. So there are definitely some considerations. I guess before we get into like horse health insurance, do you have any comments, Megan, on, either the liability or the care, custody, and control type policies?
I have both.
And you do because you have a professional facility.
Yeah. So I don't think any of my clients have insurance policies on their horses, so I'm not as familiar with that. But it's definitely something to think about to protect yourself.
I know, I think one or more people who have been sued because their horse at a boarding facility, when they were not there, hurt somebody. And so the one that I'm thinking of most recently, I don't recall if her homeowners covered it or if she had a separate policy, but it is something to consider, because you can get people sue for all sorts of things, and it would be, wouldn't be a criminal suit, it would be a civil, and somebody's going to drag you into court. Maybe your horse kicked them and they broke their leg, and so they're going to sue medical bills, or maybe their medical insurance is going to sue you because the medical insurance wants you to pay the bills and not the medical insurance. You could be, asked to pay for time off of work. I mean, so these are, I kind of want to say it's very similar to owning a car, in that we are generally, here where I live, we're legally obligated to have at least a certain level of driver, insurance on for driving, at least liability. But it's very similar in that regard because, things happen and.
But they, on the other hand, we sign release forms. We
Right.
should be fully aware horses are dangerous, when we decide to own and buy a horse. I mean, we are taking certain, I don't know, risks in our life. I mean, we're creating our own hazards. So that's
True. But
it's a fine line there. I may have.
It's a little scary though, but the thing is, you can't control if somebody's going to sue you or not. And, I mean, this situation that I'm thinking of, the horse had a history of kicking people when you went into the stall. And so you were advised to not, there were warning signs, stay out, do not enter, only the barn owner and knowledgeable barn staff are allowed in. And somebody went in anyway and, got hurt and was going to sue, and the question is, do you want to take your chance in court, pleading your case that, you had a sign there and we have, or do you want your insurance company to just handle it? So, that's a lot of money when you start talking about an annual insurance policy. So, it's something to consider, but as you just mentioned, a lot of people don't have that.
Yeah, I think a majority, I mean, I don't know for sure. I'm not an insurance agent, but I think a majority of people do not.
Right.
And, follow the rules. Don't go in the stall.
Right. Yeah. Right. So let's switch on the topic of insurance. Let's switch and talk about, we often think about health insurance for humans because, you can obtain, there's major medical type policies for horses, and then there's actual mortality. So if you invested a significant amount of money in a horse and something happens and the freak situation, whatever it may be, and the horse passes away, this policy would reimburse you for whatever the policy limit is for the value of the horse, whatever. So that is something to consider. And what do you discuss, Megan, when you are talking to clients who are like, yep, I'm ready to buy my first horse? Do you have that discussion?
Oh yeah, of course. I tell them, I give them my insurance agent number and I let them contact them. And we talk about it, if they can afford to lose the purchase price and be able to buy a horse again.
Right.
That's, I think, their own personal decision. However, I do recommend Colic Insurance, mortality. There's also loss of use. However, sometimes that's hard to
Exercise.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's hard to validate. However, you have a good vet record and you can, but honestly, I knock on wood because now it'll happen. I haven't had to use my insurance policies.
Yeah.
So in 30 years, I've been really fortunate. So hopefully that continues.
I unfortunately have had to. It's tough. It is tough. And, you said something that I think needs repeating is, can you afford to lose the investment in the blink of an eye? If, everybody has a dollar amount that they consider to be a major investment, be it $50, $500, $5,000, $50,000, $500,000, whatever, everybody, it's different. But, generally people are saving, in my experience, people are saving a significant amount of money to invest in a horse. Horses are not cheap to purchase. So can you, if this is something, can you on Monday purchase the horse for X dollars and on Friday the horse dies? Freak accident, struck by lightning, whatever. You're out that money. So, that's kind of what's your level of comfort. And It's not cheap, obviously, to insure, but it's kind of like gambling if you're not insuring them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you talked
it is.
about Colic Insurance. If you have a horse and the horse colics, sometimes it can be, if it's a mild colic, it can be treated on the farm by a veterinarian.
Uh-oh. Sorry.
They sometimes come through, fine on the farm, but sometimes they need to be transported to a surgical facility in order to save their life. And that starts to become thousands of dollars. So do you have that kind of money in the bank? Are you ready to put that kind of money out? Are you ready to take out a small loan, be it a credit card loan, go to your bank for a loan to pay
Well,
$5,000, $7,000, $10,000, $15,000 to treat a horse and bring it through a major medical event? So that's where having, a medical colic type policy on a horse is helpful.
well, and the other thing, like with colic surgery, so yes, it's $10,000. However, then you also have, the 3 months that your horse is off. So you're paying their expenses, and that may go well, that may not go well, and the veterinary expenses during that time, the farrier expenses during the time, the masseuse's expenses during that time. And then maybe you hire a PT. So you also have those expenses. And then when you're bringing, yes, yeah, physical therapist. And so then as you're bringing, after 3 months, you have, okay, now what do? You have to start taking the time and slowly bringing your horse back, which isn't you just get to hop on. It's, get to ride it for 30 minutes. No, you have to start out with walking, maybe 5 minutes and until you lead up to 30 minutes of walk. And, and you also have to have your vet coming out. It's like, when you're pregnant, you have to go for checkups. You can't, just because the horse is, had the surgery, you still have to have checkups and then slowly bringing the horse back. So it's going to take 9 to 12 months to bring your horse back. And so during that time, you also have those expenses, not to scare people away, but that's a huge financial burden. But not only that, it's an emotional burden, I think. And people need to be realistic on how much emotional attachment they get to their horse and what they put into their horse, and be ready for that.
Right. And, if the horse does go through something like that, you have to have the facilities to rehabilitate the horse. They can't just come home from a surgical facility and get thrown back out on pasture.
No.
It's a long road to recovery. So, I mean, like you said, it's not to scare people, but the reality of it is that these are huge animals and they're actually quite delicate. There's
very delicate.
Wrong. If there's a way for them to hurt themselves, they will find it.
Oh, yeah.
There is somewhere in their pasture, there is some sharp metal object that they can cut themselves on. They will find it.
Or maybe there's not. Yeah. I had a horse in the stall, and there is nothing in the stall, and he had this huge cut on his leg that needed stitches. I searched that for hours. I made everybody search that stall. We couldn't find out how he did it. I was beside myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And, horses do crazy things. If they're in a field with a tree and there's a branch down, horses have impaled themselves on branches and had, this much stick sticking into their leg or something. Creatures, and things happen. Injuries happen. Weird cuts happen. One of my geldings right now has a big, right next to his left eye, he's got about maybe the size of between a dime and a nickel. He's got just this where he's rubbed himself, and I'm like, what did you do? No idea. So, it's hot, it's buggy, I'm having to medicate him to keep the bugs off of it, and no idea what he did it on. Probably rubbing a fly off and probably scraped it on something he could find to scrape it on, be it his buddy or, the bale of hay or, his own leg, whatever. But, they do these kinds of things. And so they're, delicate. And I don't think I know anybody who hasn't had a horse injure themselves. It is a horse owner who hasn't had to deal with some sort of injury.
All the time.
Yeah. So it's something to consider. That's why, again, you bring the idea of a lease is always a nice option. And, people who are leasing, your horses can kind of understand the ups and downs, because maybe the horse they're leasing has cut himself and needs to be off for 5 days because he has sutures in an area where he shouldn't be ridden, or.
Well, it's usually before a show or a clinic.
Right?
They'll get an abscess, they'll get a lump under the saddle, anything. It's like, we're going to the horse show.
On their side.
Yeah, today is a great example. The horses are all going well. I get to my 5 o'clock lesson, has a great lesson. And so I'm walking out of the barn and she's like, Megan, can you come look at this little lump? I'm like, okay, well, we'll give it time. The vet's coming tomorrow. Thank God. We'll check it. We'll check it in the morning. Where are we going? Horse show. Of course he did that. Of course he did. And like the shoe falls off. Of course the shoe fell off. It's not the farrier's fault. We're going to a horse show.
Right.
All hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. So, I mean, this continually wraps around the idea of the financial commitment that this is, but it is a financial, but it's also an emotional commitment. And, we talked about, horse could get sick, majorly ill, and you may need to make that decision, the ultimate, decision for the horse. That's something that you need to as well. Can you make that decision? If you can't make that decision, personally, I'm an advocate to end the major suffering of an animal. If you can't afford to maybe do that colic surgery, and the vets are saying without it the horse isn't going to survive, I'm not an advocate of waiting and seeing.
No.
I'm an advocate of saying if the vets are saying this isn't going to happen, then you need to be able to make that decision. And it's really hard. I mean, it's a horrible decision to have to make, but it is our responsibility as an animal owner. The owner of an animal is to do right by them and to not allow them to suffer.
Yeah, it's a horrible decision. And I always defer to my vet. She usually is always the one to say, Megan, have you thought, as they're getting older, have you thought about when it's going to be time? And she usually gives me that pep talk, and
Right.
I start thinking about it in the preparation, on when is the right time. And honestly, that's a personal decision. The one thing that I do think is not letting your horse suffer, for you. I think that's really important to always remember. Lives are a circle, and death is a part of that. And if you cannot take that as a responsibility and an honor, I mean, it's a horrible thing to decide. I've made that decision, and it's
Right.
awful. Absolutely awful.
I don't believe animals fear death. What I do believe they fear is pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I think they're very obviously instinctive creatures. They don't have maybe the upper level learning and thought that obviously humans have. So I don't think they think about or concern themselves with death. What they do not like is being in pain. They don't like the suffering. And so I think this is where our humans and our emotions run in, is that, we think a lot about death. So that is something to consider before becoming an owner of any animal, really. Can you make those decisions? First of all, can you financially support the animal? Because if you can't support the basic care and basic veterinary, and the occasional emergencies, probably shouldn't own one. And that's where I think, like what you're offering, the lease option, I think is a great idea. But yeah, inevitably you're going to have the vet out for more than spring and fall shots. You're going to have something, in teeth. Something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. I mean,
It's
right?
not if, it's when.
Yeah. And how often?
Not often.
Hopefully
There might be a bumpy road in the beginning, and usually I actually find most of the horse's issues are actually, it might be the owner, like the anxiety that we carry develops in the horse and certain things pop up. And so, like we're excited in the beginning, and usually
Mhm.
that's when things are going to happen. You know,
I hate to
so
I feel like we're such a downer on this whole conversation, but it's the reality of considering having, owning your first horse or even any animal at this point. We're having that broader conversation, but um, you know, I lost, I had horses, my first horses, I was a kid, and I experienced losing my first horse as a kid.
Mhm.
So, I've lost a lot of horses between now and then. We generally outlive our horses.
We
um,
do.
so, and I've lost them at very old, they've been very old horses, and I've unfortunately lost very young horses. So, it's always an emotional, horrific, you know,
It is.
and
That's
it can be worse when it's a surprise and it's unplanned. I've been able to plan for, older horses that were declining, as you just spoke.
mhm.
It's awful when it's, an emergency, and it's the emotional, and it's the human thing. It's the emotional. And the horses at this point, they don't want pain. They don't want to suffer. Animals just fear pain.
Mhm.
Use pain, health pain, the infirmities of old age pain. They fear pain.
I believe that.
Death.
The
And maybe they see something we don't. I mean, who knows? But so yeah, that is definitely a part of owning an animal or a horse is can you be prepared, and can you make the correct decisions?
the and the other thing you mentioned is our own passing, and if our horses outlive us.
True.
I actually have written a letter on what my wishes are on my horses if I were to pass away. And my vet has it. So does my family. So that way it's very clear what I wish for my horses. And I also have clients who have asked me if they pass away, if I would care for their horses. But remember, that's a big burden if you don't leave, you know, some
Supportive
money to take
funding.
care of the horse. So don't die. Um,
Right.
but
Right.
it's something to really consider, because what were to happen if you were to pass away, I hope it doesn't, but we have to think about that. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
that's all a part of ownership.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, we've talked a lot on the financial. We've talked about, obviously, there's the purchase price, getting the horse, you got to pay somebody to trailer the horse to the new facility that you're going to be paying. You're going to need to buy tack, the equipment that you use and it's not just the bridle and the bit and the saddle pad and the girth, but there's the grooming stuff that you need to buy, and all kinds of good things to purchase.
The shampoo.
There's that financial, there's the potential to insure the horse, for like a major medical type, colic type insurance if you want. There's obviously the monthly boarding. There's the farrier or blacksmiths. We call them a farrier. Some people don't understand what that term is. That's the wild, the old west. You might have heard in movies, blacksmith. So person who keeps the horse's feet in working order. There's your veterinarian, and it's deworming. It's, general basic health vaccinations like we get as humans. They get vaccinations way more frequently than we do. They have their teeth constantly grow because they're grazers. They have to have their teeth looked at a minimum yearly, preferably 2 or more, sometimes times a year. You have to looking at their eyes and their overall condition. Sometimes they require specialized care, special feed, or maybe special nutritional or medical supplements, medications. Those are all things to consider. So anything else that we've missed, Megan, on, kind of financial considerations when you're working out a budget?
No, I think we got it all covered.
Yeah,
I think we got it all covered.
Yeah.
We did good.
And
we rocked it tonight.
The deep, dark hole of horse blanket infatuations.
Don't go there. Yeah. I have a whole room of blankets. It's one whole room. I think it's like 9 by 30.
Yeah.
And it's up in my loft. And literally it is a room with hooks all around the top of the room, and blankets.
Fun and pretty, and there's blankets for everything. So
they're awesome.
There's fly masks that you put on their head to keep the flies off their eyeballs, or in their ears. And there's fly sheets for their bodies, and there's boots that you wrap their legs in boots for turnout, maybe so they don't hurt themselves and have to have a vet bill.
Yeah.
There's bell boots. You may need to put your horse in bell boots so they don't throw a shoe right before the horse show, which they'll do.
No. They will anyway. It doesn't matter.
There's, boots that you may need to put on their legs for when you're riding them so they don't bump their legs when you're riding them. All kinds of fun things that you can spend money on.
No, don't do it.
Sparkly brow bands. And then as a rider, you need to be appropriately dressed in safe attire. You need at least a safe helmet and boots with a heel, some sort of boot or shoe with a heel, paddock boots or taller boots or cowboy boots, and that's a safety thing. That's the basic safety thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right. It's exciting.
Yeah, it's just a lot.
But horse ownership can be very rewarding. It's a lot of fun, but I think it's important to be realistic in what you're getting into.
Right. And it can be actually a really excellent way to just calm yourself after a stressful day of work. Sometimes, I work in an office environment. It's sometimes really nice to just, I'm around, a lot of people during the day, all day during the week. Sometimes it's nice to come home and just go out and spend 45 minutes brushing my horse, nice long, kind of de-stresses me, and then you can get on and have a nice ride and you're away from the noise of the day-to-day work. It's a really nice, it's a wonderful thing.
Oh yeah. The gifts we get from horses, totally worth it.
So what else do we talk about for, considerations for owning your first horse? Definitely, if you're going to go look to purchasing a horse, do your best to find a professional like Megan, somebody to help you so you don't pick the wrong horse, because we could turn this conversation and talk about people, we've talked a little bit in previous live streams about ethics. We've kind of talked about it more or less surrounding the idea of trainers and stuff, but people selling can be very unethical. And you need to have a skilled person and somebody who's really knowledgeable in horses, such as Megan, to take with you to understand whether or not this horse is going to be suitable for what you want to do with it. Is the horse going to be safe when he gets home? And Megan's seen and bought sold lots of horses. She might be like, ooh, people have drugged horses for people to come try and ride and make them look like they're super calm, or they maybe 2 hours before the buyer comes to look at the horse, they may have worked the horse for 3 hours. The horse is so tired, doesn't have the energy anymore to act naughty, but then you get it home and realize you have this horse that you can't even ride. It's just way too much horse for you. So that's where someone such as yourself is really important to utilize in the purchasing process.
I think it's good to utilize a professional, but sometimes we don't find the right horse either, and it's not anyone's fault, like I said, maybe we didn't know the horse was worked 6 days a week. Right. And then the horse is purchased and now it's only being ridden 2 to 3 times a week, or simply it's just a different change in lifestyle and the boundaries aren't set. And so now the horse is being a little bit spoiled. And sometimes that's hard for people to understand. And so sometimes that's why maybe working with a professional or staying with, sometimes that's not realistic, but staying with, maintaining the same tack of the previous owner and seeing how they handle the horse, because sometimes those changes are quite big and the horse is very under a lot of stress. And what we're not buying the car. The car is so easy to buy. Either it's stock or it's not, and we can put all the bells and whistles on it. When we purchase the horse, we're purchasing the relationship of the owner, of the rider who's riding the horse and presenting it to us. And so if you do not manage the horse in the same fashion, the horse is going to change. Right. And so it's not always that it's a bad seller or bad owner. Sometimes we didn't maintain that horse well. So I think that's also really important to know too. Absolutely. And and that's why I said in the middle of this conversation, you really need to set the ground rules and what the boundaries are and what the consequences are. And if you don't, your horse is going to change. And you have to tell them what you want. And if you don't tell them what you want, then they're going to do what they want.
In the words of the dog whisperer Cesar Millan, rules, boundaries, and limitations. These aren't even dogs. These are big animals that can do major damage, that when they step on you, run you over, kick you, you could be in the hospital from that. So proper rules, boundaries, and limitations. And yeah, definitely you have to keep the similar rules, boundaries, and limitations of what the previous owner has set. Very good points. Very good points. And yeah, one thing we haven't talked about, we definitely talked about it in previous live streams, but we talked about, purchasing and things, but ask questions, ask a lot of questions. Questions. Like you said, maybe the owner rides this horse 6 days a week and you're really thinking your commitment to getting out to the boarding facility is going to be 2 to 3 times a week. So you need to find out, what's this horse used to, as you said.
Very important.
The horse is also being ridden 6 times a week for 45 minutes and you're only going to come out 3 times a week for a half hour. That's a significant change, as you mentioned.
Huge. And people and it's not always that people are hiding things too. Like we forget, like people ask me all the time, what is the age of this horse? And I honestly don't know. They don't age. I'm not thinking about it.
Absolutely.
Also, what was I going to say? Lost my train of thought. Sorry, guys.
No, yeah. You have to be, you have to ask questions because, there's a lot of things that it's not the seller's responsibility to just give you like all this verbal diarrhea, excuse the expression, but, they're not going to remember everything. So, oftentimes you asking a question will jog, oh, that's right. So yeah, good question. So this happened 2 years ago, whatever the question may be.
And we have different levels of expectations. What I think is a schoolmaster, is totally different than what someone else may think is a schoolmaster, so making sure to ask certain questions, I think, is really important. And so it just goes to a level of experience and expectations. So always ask.
Yeah. And you can't, yeah, you can't go back after the fact. And if it's something that,
Oh,
really
that's
needed to know.
that's the other thing. If you buy the horse and it doesn't work out, you can always sell it. Do not get stuck with a horse that you think you have to own. I can tell you a story. I had a wonderful client many, many years ago, older client in her 60s, and I met her as a young trainer, and she had this horse. Every time she girthed it, it reared. It bit her. It threatened to buck when she's riding, and she's 60 years old, people. Why do you have this horse? And I asked her one day, I said, why do you have this horse? Why don't you sell it? And she said, well, who would buy it? And I'm like, I don't know, but this is not the right horse for you. And she struggled with that. And the horse was good for me. So I was like, I think it's just a bad match. And
Mhm.
so
And that
in the
happens. That
in
happens.
the yeah, in the end, I had a horse for sale, and he would go lame in the trailer every time I took him to a horse show. Like the vibrations, it irritated his shoulder, and he stood funny. And so I didn't want to sell him to anyone who wanted to show him, and he was perfect. And so I said, well, how about we do a trade plus a little money, and I will take on this horse and I will sell it. And I budgeted like 3 months that it would take, because she was a little difficult, and we traded. And actually, I sold her in 3 weeks. And I told them, this is her attitude, this, and this. They loved her. They kept her the rest of her, and they bred her. But that's a case where it was just a mismatch, and you don't have to be stuck with a horse. It's not the
Right.
end of the world. You
Right.
can always change, and maybe it's just a bad match.
Right.
Move on.
And I don't know why I haven't said this, but don't buy the first horse you look at if it's not, maybe it is maybe it's the perfect horse for you, but don't just buy the first horse.
Try other horses. Yeah, that's good advice.
And sometimes you need more than one trip to look at the horse, right? I mean,
Oh yeah, take
you
as
can't
many trips as
expect
you
a lot,
can.
right? Yeah. I mean, you can't tell the seller that you want to come back every day for the next 25 days and
No, you can't. I mean, you
but
can offer to put a deposit down, or, I think every sale is different, but you could offer to pay, board the month if you want. You could ask for a trial. I mean, they can always say no. But you could ask and pay them for their time. I've had people do that. They're like, well, I want to try this horse, but I'll pay you for lessons. Usually the standard is like 2 or 3 times coming out and trying. But
right.
then after that,
Hmm.
I mean, it's a lot of work. So, but if they're willing to be open and let you try the horse as many times, definitely take advantage of it, but let them know. But if somebody else wants to come and try the horse, they should be able to do that if you haven't put a deposit down.
Absolutely. So that's a really good point too. Yeah, I would say 2, maybe 3 times trying a horse is well, within pretty normal bounds. But anything more than that, like you mentioned, you really need to, if you're going to keep that up, you need to have that discussion with the seller and make sure they're comfortable. It may require putting a deposit down. It may be refundable. It may not be refundable. If you want first right of refusal on a horse, or you want them to take a horse off the market while you are trying the horse, you need to compensate the seller for that. The
Yeah.
seller can't be expected to take a horse off the market for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it may be, just so you can decide whether you're going to buy the horse or not. That's completely unfair. So it has been done, but generally it's you're compensating the seller a percentage of the sale or a set dollar amount to take the horse off the market briefly,
Yeah.
or they can continue to market the horse, but you have first right of refusal. So maybe they showed a horse to somebody and that person's really interested, they will call you and say, you need to make the decision now. I have somebody who's willing to buy this horse. You want first right of refusal. You know, you've paid X dollars for first right of refusal. You have the next 24, 48, whatever the agreement is, but have that conversation, right?
Yeah.
Have all that detail. You know, if you're doing a first right of refusal, okay, so the seller can still, you know, market the horse, but what is the time frame of the first right of refusal? If the caller or if the seller calls you and says, I have someone interested, what was the agreement? Do you get, you know, 24 hours to schedule a vet, 48 hours, you know?
I don't know.
That all needs to be discussed. It shouldn't be like, you know, I've seen a lot of discussion on various social media of buyers really mad that, well, the seller sold the horse right out from under me. Well, the seller isn't your best friend. The seller's trying to sell the horse, and that's all they're after, you know. So it's the buyer's interest. If the buyer is hemming and hawing and isn't sure, that's, you know, you either put a deposit on the horse, as you mentioned, so that you can wrap your brain around buying this horse, or it's a form of gambling. It's like being in the casino. You're gambling with whether or not that horse gets sold away from you. So
Yep.
that's things people don't realize. It's not the seller's responsibility to hold on to the horse until you make the decision.
Nope, not at all.
Horse, you know, it's kind of like a car. If you go to a used car lot or you go to even a new car sales lot and you like that particular model that's got that particular color paint and that particular color interior, you know, it's whatever little features are on the car and it's the only one on the lot. If you go home and you haven't bought it and you come back the next day, it could be sold. It's the same thing, you know, a horse. So
Yep.
we have a couple new people. I just want to shout out. Hello, Mo Latrice. Good to see you. She's got a question, Megan.
Yay.
What is a good starter? I think she meant horse for a 9-year-old wanting to learn to ride and maybe compete with. That is an excellent question. That is fantastic. It's crazy little horse, right? Crazy little girls who are horse crazy,
Yeah.
like we were.
Yeah.
Torturing their parents for a horse.
Yeah.
So, okay. So yeah, I'll leave that on there. What's your suggestion?
Well, my suggestion is, you know, is the 9-year-old, well, where is the experience? As a totally beginner taking lessons, very capable little rider.
She says
You know,
wanting to learn to ride and then maybe with 9-year-old.
oh, well, I would
So
definitely get an older horse. And people shy away from the older horses, but I would get an older, experienced horse, maybe a quarter horse, something that's a little small. Ponies, I love ponies. However, you have to make sure it's not the devil.
Ponies are either wonderful or they're little monsters.
Yeah. So I've met a lot of monsters. So that's where I would go. Maybe with a nice little quarter horse that's a little bit older, or a Welsh cob. I currently have a Welsh cob purchased for an 8. I think it was her 8. No, maybe it was 9. I think she was turning 8. And so she was just coming off the lunge line, and he's been super for her. You know, he's a little bit slower. She can learn how to kick him and steer him, and she's learned walk, trot, canter, had her first horse show. I mean, I prefer under horse them over horse them for sure.
Yeah. The worst, the proverbial worst thing is young rider, young horse. Young inexperienced rider with a young inexperienced horse, and generally that's because of financial. That's always a bad deal.
Don't do it.
She says she tried a pony, was not a fan. That could be very true, but you know what? It doesn't necessarily always have to be a pony. It could be a honey. It could be a horse, an older horse that's just not huge. That can be almost pony height, you know, or a pony that's grown out a little bit over, you know, and is still, it isn't truly a pony in the legal sense of the word. But like you said, usually an older horse is going to be one that's doesn't really want to doesn't have the young horse energy to, be naughty. They just want, be polite and do their thing.
Good question.
Asking whether I know him, and I remember you, Jeremiah. So, yeah, that's where I'm going to say having someone such as yourself, really, if a kid wants to learn how to ride, my suggestion is before you go out and buy a horse, find someone such as Megan and start taking lessons, weekly lessons or bi-weekly, or however, often you can afford to do it. Start with a competent riding instructor who has a safe school horse that they can learn on, and start there. You don't have the expense of owning the horse. Especially young kids grow, right? You might have a kid who is, 3'6" right now at whatever they're at, and 5 years from now they could be 5'4" at, depending all there and where they are and growing. And so that's different horse sizes right there. So, to go back to her question, a starter horse to learn to ride on, in my opinion, it's find someone like Megan, who is a qualified instructor who has school horses, and start there. And Megan, you've done kids camps. So that is an option, possibly, depending on where you live. You want to talk about what you first of all, who the clientele for the kids camps are, like what their level of experience is, and what you teach them in to kind of get their horsey appetite?
It's more of a horsemanship camp, and it's geared more towards an absolute beginner who just wants to touch a horse. And so the first day is usually chores, feeding, watering, giving them hay, cleaning a stall, raking an aisle. The second day is usually on parts of a horse, tacking up, braiding, clipping, parts of the tack. And then the last day is usually a lesson. And they get a couple, 10 to 12 minutes on the horse, on the lunge line. And then
a great introduction.
Yeah, it's a great introduction to see, and a couple of the kids have actually gone through the camp like 3 times. And then they usually start lessons. And like I said, actually one of the little girls went through the camp, took lessons, and then bought a horse. So, her parents bought her a horse.
So back centuries ago, eons, millennia ago, when I was actually a kid, which is many, many thousands of years ago, my first experience, very early experience, some friend of a friend of the family had a horse, and, I was probably 4 years old. Of course, that was when I got hit by the bug. But when I became older and I was hounding my parents, we actually had a local camp program where you could go in the summer times for 1 week, 2 weeks. You're moving around. A couple of weeks, and very similar to what you are talking about, but it was like day and night. We went there, we camped. They had a bunkhouse, so you camped with everybody in the bunkhouse, and it was experience. But they also offered through, I was very fortunate, they offered through, I was in middle school, and they offered through the school once a week. They would bus the children to the farm. You would get like an hour's lesson about, as you talked about, cleaning stalls, cleaning tack, learning about the horsemanship, and then you would get to ride safe ponies or horses, and you there. So that could be an option. Look for, I would say, before you jump into buying a horse for a young, inexperienced child, start the lessons to see, first of all, sometimes they lose interest.
Yeah, they do.
You don't have the ownership of the horse to deal with if they lose interest. So, even if they're doing lessons, such as, for yourself, Megan, they could move to in your situation, they could move into a lease situation. From taking regular lessons, they could move into leasing a horse with you.
Mm-hmm.
So again, not making that full on commitment to purchasing a horse right off the bat. So that's a great question, definitely, but young kids and young horses don't mix.
No, they don't. No, they don't.
Mix. So yeah. At least inexperienced kids and inexperienced horses, it's not a good combination.
Not good at all.
Inexperienced people in general with inexperienced horses is just never a good combination. So,
Nope.
so yeah, that was a great question. So thank you, Mo. Appreciate it. That was a really excellent question.
Thank you, Mom.
Yeah. Jeremiah's asking about, I think he wants to know monetization on the channel, and that's a little off topic, Jeremiah, but I can tell you it's pennies. It's not much. You don't make a lot of money on YouTube at all. It takes a long time, but Megan and I have talked about this. We appreciate it if we get a super chatter in here who either sends us a sticker. It helps support the channel. It might be $1.99 or something, but appreciate that because YouTube likes to take their portion, and it's pretty nearly everything. That was a bit of a side note, but we talk about supporting the channel and stuff, and appreciate that. But yeah, I think that was a great question that Mo had about, and it doesn't have to be a young kid wanting to learn. I have met a ton of, and it's mostly ladies, so I don't mean to be sexist. It can be gentlemen as well, but who, a little bit later in life want to start riding. Maybe they, horse crazy as a kid, but it just wasn't feasible, a situation. Maybe they lived in the city and it just was never an option to find a place to ride, or maybe it was a financial burden at the time. But I've met a lot of people who are maybe in their late 20s or early 30s or even later in life who are like, I want to learn how to ride. So I think the same suggestion is to find someone such as yourself, Megan, and start taking lessons before you jump to ownership.
For sure.
Because that's like jumping off a cliff.
Yeah.
If you just have no idea, never have ridden or anything, that's pretty brutal.
Yeah. Take lessons.
Yeah. Oh, you might find that it sounded really fun, but you might find that maybe it's just, I don't want to say scary, but it can be scary, and
It can be scary.
Maybe it's just not for you, but not everybody rides. Some people, and I don't want to be like, so like, what's the word I'm looking for? Prejudiced against people who are not able-bodied. I know a number of people who have disabilities who ride. We have not far from me a therapeutic riding facility where they have very safe horses and a lot of helpers. And so if you have physical limitations, you don't necessarily have to be thinking you can never ride. And I want to say that if you really don't believe me, just search United States Para Equestrian Team, and
amazing.
Find information on our para Olympians, and they are people who have all sorts of disabilities in life who are riding, but there's also driving. People, I know people who are in wheelchair bound who they drive, and they are amazing. And it's a way to be horsey, and maybe you can't ride, but some of the most impressive, in my opinion, riders in the world are the para athletes who are at the top of the world in the para Olympics. There is a woman, I believe she's on the German team. She has no arms and no legs, and she rides.
She's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and the reins they're in her mouth, and it's it's just, she's amazing. It's phenomenal. And so, you know, if you are watching this and you're kind of feeling blue, because maybe you are not fully able-bodied, there are many, many therapeutic facilities that you can look for, and who can help you. So I definitely want to do a shout out and say this isn't necessarily something that only able-bodied people will ever experience in life, because I have a number of friends who work in the therapeutic or the para world, and they're inspiring, and the stories of the students and the riders is phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. So you know, we're an hour and 20 minutes into this, but I do want to say, it's, you know, you don't have to be fully able-bodied. There are ways to be around horses or to ride. You just want to make sure that it's a certified facility, and that's definitely a discussion for a different night. But so appreciate everybody. I see Rufus K. Jones is in the house. Hello, Fun with Jeremiah. Shout out to you. We shout out to Mo Latrice. She had a great question. So appreciate you. Just some comments. Good to see everybody in the chat here. So just as a reminder, every now and then I kind of post it in the chat, but if you got questions, go ahead, drop them in the chat. You know, we've been on for an hour and 20 minutes. We're probably about wrapped up. You know, there's probably a million more things we could talk about, Megan, but I mean, I really do feel like we've hit some of the most important, I think.
I think we have. Yeah. No, I definitely think this is the most important. Financial, emotional, time commitment.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Almost in that order. You know, I think financial and time commitment are maybe top two. Emotional right up there, though. It's hard. You know, it's different for everybody. But they're key. So it's not for everybody, and you don't have to own a horse. There are options. There's riding lessons. There's a potential to lease. So definitely some options. You know, anything else? You know, there's a million avenues we could go down, but I don't think we need to tonight. So, you know, those who are on right now, just want to see, does anybody have any follow-up questions for Megan while she's on, and myself? Because, you know, we're getting close to the 1 hour and 30, and I think we're about ready to be done at that. Right?
Yeah. Thank you to everyone for joining us.
Yeah.
Great question.
And even those of you who, you know, are not watching this live, this will be available on YouTube for you know, it takes about 24 hours for it to go live on YouTube, as far as to be able to be replayed. But appreciate anybody who is on now or is watching this later. And this is where I kind of start wrapping things up and talking about, you know, if you have questions for Megan and I, this has been a fairly consistent live stream we've been doing. Generally, we would do it on Thursday nights, but we did not do it last week. We mentioned that in the beginning. It was Memorial Day. We just decided not to do it, you know, without Monday, Memorial Day, and it was kind of a holiday week. We skipped it. And then you've got a horse show coming up, so we had to on Tuesday. Had planned this for about a week. So hopefully the next week, hopefully we can get back to Thursdays, or at least find a time where we can be a little bit more consistent. But Megan's information will be down below in the description. It might be there already, but if not, I will make sure it's there. Megan, how would you prefer, if they have questions or want to talk to you about your program? What would you like them to know?
They can call me at 608-445-8531 or email lindinhofllc@gmail.com. If I don't respond in 24 hours, I didn't get it. So try again. But yeah, I love to help anyone. And thank you so much for watching. And thank you.
You have a Facebook page for your business?
I sure do. Lindinhof Equine Sports Zentrum on Facebook. Come check us out.
So you can find her there. She's also, your website is?
Lindinhof.com. But it's old. We're trying to update it. It was supposed to be done May 1st. It's still not done. So,
But they can find the link to your email there, right?
yep, they sure can.
Something, maybe they sent you an email and it didn't come through. They can find it. They can find it there, but probably easiest is to pick up the phone and call you.
You bet. Thank you.
So she does have a YouTube channel, and you've been doing a lot of really great videos the last couple months, adding to your channel. So you have some content people can kind of watch and get inspired.
They
Right?
sure can. Come on out.
So doesn't look like we've got anybody asking any more questions, which is fine. So we can probably go ahead and wrap this up. Yeah, appreciate you taking your time, Megan. I know you've had
Thank you.
weekend. You've got a busy week. It's been hot out. You've got a horse show you're planning to
Yay.
very shortly. So busy, 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 and hot. So appreciate it. Understand
Well,
there's
thank you.
bad weather headed in your direction possibly this evening. So hope that goes okay and you don't have any problems with that, other than maybe it'll cool things down. So
I hope so.
yeah, right. It's pretty brutal out. So thanks so much. We'll let you head out, Megan. And
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hopefully we will be back next Thursday, a week from 2 days, right?
All right, let's do it.
All right. Thanks,
Bye.
Megan. Bye-bye. Okay. I let her go. So thank you guys. I want to thank you guys again for tuning in. Again, if you are watching this, go to the channel first to watch the YouTube ads. That's how we can kind of keep this content going. YouTube likes to, pay their bills. And so they like to run their ads. So appreciate that very much. Again, if you have questions, for Megan or myself, you can contact myself through the channel here. You can contact Megan and how she just give her information. And if you have topics you'd like us to discuss, we're always looking for the next topic to talk about. So shoot us an email or message us. Also, obviously have you can send her Facebook page with Lindinhof. You can find for Zentrum on Facebook. Obviously, you can find Opinionated Horsewoman on Facebook as well. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. And we will be live in about a week and 2 days. So we're going to go on the next live stream the following Thursday next week. So hope to see you guys there. And don't forget to give us a thumbs up. See you guys. And thank you again.